Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. Photo of Schwartz after suffering a plane crash in 1931. Erroneously identified as dead, she was placed in the trunk of a car and taken to the morgue, where it was discovered that she was still alive but in a coma. Years later, she returned to athletics, where her team won Olympic gold in 1936. Lion tamer and animal trainer Jack Bonavita poses with his lions. An esteemed circus performer at the turn of the century in New York, Bonavita was eventually killed by one of his animals in 1917. This is how dental care was done at home in the 1920s. At that time, without the easy access to dentists we have today, many people performed dental treatments on their own or with the help of family members. Tank Man is the nickname given to the unidentified Chinese protester who stood in front of a column of tanks leaving Tiananmen Square in Beijing on June 5, 1989. A man and a woman hiding under a bridge after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989 in Beijing, China. The massacre occurred when the Chinese government sent military troops to brutally suppress pro-democracy protesters. In 1928, the world's largest horse was registered at the time, a true curiosity that impressed everyone. With its height and imposing stature, the horse was an attraction wherever it was exhibited, standing out among ordinary animals due to its extraordinary size. This striking photo shows the face of legendary hockey goalkeeper Terry Sawchuk, marked by numerous scars acquired throughout his career before protective masks became common in the game. A group of young people in the early days of surfing in the 1920s. They are holding rudimentary wooden boards, very different from the lightweight and aerodynamic boards we know today. This 1970 photo shows one of the models who helped bring the iconic image of Uncle Sam, the personification of the United States, to life. Uncle Sam, with his wide-brimmed hat, white beard, and star-studded suit, became a patriotic symbol, especially popular during World War I and World War II. In the 1930s, if you wanted to travel with the comfort of air conditioning, you needed a swamp cooler attached to the car window. Its use continued until the 1960s, when modern air conditioning became a regular feature in conventional cars. Two American soldiers sleeping in a trench in Normandy during Operation Overlord in the summer of 1944. The Face of War is a work by Salvador Dali, made in late 1940 in California, United States during World War II. Showing the horrific face of war, Dali was trying to demonstrate through the painting all the terror that surrounded World War II. Elderly women with characteristic Croatian Catholic tattoos in Bosnia in the 1930s and 1940s. Young girls in 1930s China having their feet bound to modify their shape. This practice, applied only to girls, was almost 1,000 years old and occurred primarily in China, causing disabilities to many girls. In the 1930s, two scientists, Winthrop Kellogg and his wife Luella, conducted a cross-raising study in which a 7-month-old chimpanzee named Gua was raised alongside their 10-month-old human son, Donald. In 1920, during the Tour de France, cyclists in the peloton shared and smoked cigarettes while pedaling. The belief at the time was that this helped open the lungs before facing the longer climbs. A full-face swimming mask designed to protect women's skin from the sun in the 1920s. The giant heads of Easter Island have long fascinated historians and archaeologists, but there is more there than meets the eye. Since 1914, archaeologists have been investigating the torsos of these incredible statues. The face and head skin warming mask used in the 1940s was a curious beauty device of that era. Participants of the beauty contest Miss Beautiful Eyes, held in Paris in 1930. The event celebrated the charm and expressiveness of the eyes, something highly valued at the time. Georges Blind, a member of the French resistance, smiling at a German firing squad, 1944. Some of the fiercest warriors in history were the Onabugeisha, the female samurai of Japan. They trained and fought alongside men, using a light and sharp sword called a naginata, which allowed them to defend their lands and families with great skill. Jacob C. Miller was shot in the face during the American Civil War in 1863. Incredibly, he survived, but he carried an open wound for the rest of his life. The so-called Lion Man, whose real name was Stefan Bobrowski, was a popular attraction in the early 20th century. Two girls delivering ice in Manhattan in September 1918. In the United States, women had never worked in jobs like these until World War I caused a shortage of men. Christopher Robin Milne, son of author A. Milne, with his teddy bear, which inspired the famous character Winnie the Pooh, taken in the 1920s. In 1946, in Romania, people used curious methods to relieve back pain, such as in this photo, where a bear is used to perform the treatment. A man performing maintenance mid-flight on a small plane, circa the 1940s. Such daring actions were more common at a time when aviation was still developing, and risky maneuvers were part of the pilots' and engineers' daily lives. An outdoor barber using an axe to shave a man's beard in a scene captured around the 1930s. During World War II in 1944 on a Pacific island, American soldiers care for a wounded dog, part of the war dog units used to detect enemies. Cheryl Brown, after winning the Miss Decora pageant on June 13, 1970. She beat 19 white competitors to win Miss Iowa, becoming the first African-American contestant for the Miss America title in 1971. A photograph taken at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios in the late 1950s, in which the universal genius of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, appears serving tea to Leo, the MGM's no less universal icon. Newsboy Ned Parfit sells copies of the evening paper with news of the Titanic's sinking the night before, April 16, 1912. Coal miners climb a coal mine elevator after a day of work in Belgium in the 1920s. The last sword duel in French history in 1967 between the mayor of Marseille and the Socialist Party's presidential candidate. Astronaut chimpanzee posing for the camera after a successful space mission, 1961. A police sergeant, nicknamed Ghost, is seen standing in the 1930s holding a wooden replica rifle in one hand and a baton in the other. In 1878, Billy the Kid Left played cricket with his squad, the Regulators, in New Mexico. Statue called The Thinker by the French artist Rodin. It was brought to San Francisco by the art collector Big Alma Spreckles in the 1920s. The philanthropist, known for her physical stature and great wealth, donated a lot of money to develop the art scene in San Francisco. Seen from the iconic movie The Phantom of the Opera, the film hit the screens starring Mary Philbin as Christine Daae. Mary was the #1 name for girls throughout the 1920s. This photo supposedly shows a 28-foot crocodile shot in Australia. Some claim, however, that the crocodile's size is due to the camera's forced perspective. The intact seal on the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings, Egypt, before it was opened in 1922. The seal, made of rope and sealed with clay, remained untouched for more than 3,000 years. This is the last recorded photo of a thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger, taken in 1933. This fascinating animal, now extinct, lived in Australia and Tasmania. During World War II, a Polish unit adopted a bear named Wojtek into their unit. Wojtek drank beer, smoked cigarettes, and even had his own rank and serial number. In the 1940s, Margaret Gibb receives a kiss from her boyfriend under the watchful eye of her conjoined twin sister, Mary. They were inseparable, literally. Hachiko was a dog that belonged to Professor Isaburo Uno. Every day, Uno would walk to Shibuya Station with Hachiko and take the train to work. One day, Uno suffered a cerebral hemorrhage while giving a lecture and died. For the next 9 years, Hachiko went to the station and waited for his owner. This is the last photograph taken of Hachiko, a famous Japanese Akita dog known for his unwavering loyalty to his owner. Audrey Hepburn shopping with her pet deer IP in Beverly Hills, California, 1958. Sam Scher, a photojournalist, is best known for his 1937 photo capturing the explosion of the Hindenburg dirigible during its return from a transatlantic voyage. Taken by Louis Hine in the early 20th century, it shows a young girl working in a textile factory, highlighting the harsh conditions of child labor during the Industrial Revolution in the United States. Women wearing typical clothing of their era. The most impressive thing you will notice about 1920s fashion is the shape of women's silhouettes, which were surprisingly straight and flat, without curves as we are accustomed to today. On October 14, 1940, a 3,000-pound bomb hit Balham Underground Station in London during World War II. The bomb pierced about 30 feet below the surface and exploded right above the passageway between the station's two platforms. Hitler, addressing the Reichstag at the Kroll Opera House in Berlin on December 11, 1941, to declare war on the United States. A monkey who enjoys traveling catches a ride on the backpack of a Chinese infantry soldier on the new Lado Road that helped conquer Burma. During the 1940s, Stetson Kennedy infiltrated the KKK under a false name to gather information about their activities. At the beginning of the 20th century, Chicago was one of the most crime-ridden places in America. After the passing of Prohibition in 1920, powerful smuggling gangs and gangsters formed to profit from the illegal alcohol trade. Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Police John A. Leach, in uniform, overseeing the disposal of seized alcohol during a Prohibition operation in 1921. The first official FIFA World Cup was held in 1930. Jules Rimet developed the entire championship, which was contested in Uruguay, where the local team emerged victorious. On March 14, 1951, his 72nd birthday, Albert Einstein was surrounded by paparazzi as he left work at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Irritated by the gathered press group, the world-famous theoretical physicist stuck out his tongue. The opening of the 1980 Summer Olympics held in Moscow in the Soviet Union. The ceremony, marked by great pomp and spectacle, was a demonstration of national pride and power, with thousands of athletes from around the world parading at Luzhniki Olympic Stadium. Dorothy Counts, the first black girl to attend an all-white school in the United States, being mocked and insulted by her white peers at Harry Harding High School in Charlotte, 1957. Arctic explorer Peter Freuchen poses with his wife in 1947. He lost a leg due to frostbite in 1926. Stagecoach Mary, a 6-foot-tall woman born into slavery, was said to have a temper like a grizzly bear. In the late 1800s, she became the first black female mail carrier in the United States. The last photo taken of eccentric inventor Nikola Tesla on January 1, 1943. Although he produced a series of impressive inventions during his lifetime, Tesla died penniless and alone. Balaji Badejo, a 6'10" Nigerian design student, was the actor behind the iconic xenomorph costume in the classic science fiction thriller Alien in 1978. His imposing stature and elegant movements brought the alien to life in a unique and terrifying way. Photo from the 1930s of Ted Drake from Arsenal being carried off the field unconscious. They brought him back and sent him onto the field, where Ted scored 3 goals. The famous dog, Rin Tin Tin, a German shepherd who participated in World War I. After being rescued from the conflict, he became a Hollywood star, appearing in various films and series, beginning his acting career in 1923 in the movie Where the North Begins. Photo during a Halloween celebration in the United States in the 1920s. People are dressed in large, scary costumes and masks. At that time, Halloween costumes were more sinister and handmade, which contributed to this bizarre look. Bonnie and Clyde, the notorious American criminal duo, left a mark on the nation's history during the Great Depression. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, as they were known, carried out a crime spree in the 1930s that caught the attention of the American public. This famous photo, taken in 1932, depicts 11 workers casually having lunch on a steel beam hundreds of feet above the ground during the construction of Rockefeller Center in New York, known as lunch atop a skyscraper. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, speedway races at Stamford Bridge in London were a major attraction for the public. A police motorcycle with a sidecar prison cell to transport prisoners. Los Angeles, 1920s. In 1839, Robert Cornelius took what is still considered the first photographic self-portrait in history. The Nazi laws prevented August Landmesser from marrying the Jewish Irma Eckler. He showed his indignation by refusing to give the Nazi salute. Inventor Chester E. McDuffie stands beside one of the first atmospheric diving suits, circa 1911. The suit weighed 550 pounds. This incredible photo from 1899 is considered the first ever taken underwater, marking a historic moment for photography. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko was a Soviet sniper during World War II. She was credited with 309 Nazi soldier kills, possibly more than 500, making her still considered the most successful female sniper in history. Colonel Sanders, best known today as the mascot character of Kentucky Fried Chicken, was based on the real-life founder of KFC, Harlan David Sanders. Sanders began serving fried chicken at his gas station in Kentucky in the 1930s. The graves of a Catholic woman and her Protestant husband separated by a wall, the Netherlands, 1888. This photo shows the first subway train ride at Edgware Road Station in London in 1862, marking the beginning of a new era in transportation. Baby cages were used to ensure that children received enough sunlight and fresh air while living in an apartment building, 1937. Measuring bathing suits, if they were too short, women would be fined in the 1920s. Poster for the 1934 film Two Monks, directed by Juan Bustillo Oro, a famous Mexican movie. The plot revolves around two monks. In the 1930s, Chicago stood out for its architectural and urban innovations, including the car elevator system. The Beatles playing for 18 people at the Aldershot Club, December 1961. They would become superstars in a year and a half. James Naismith, the inventor of basketball, holding a basket while demonstrating the game with his wife holding a ball. Naismith created basketball in 1891 as a way to keep his students active during the winter months. A U.S. Navy sailor kissing an unknown woman on VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day, in Times Square at the end of World War II. This iconic photo shows Mahatma Gandhi, the pacifist leader of Indian independence, sitting quietly beside a spinning wheel known as charkha. Gandhi promoted the use of the charkha as a symbol of self-sufficiency and resistance to British colonial domination. Arnold Schwarzenegger, at 16, competing in his first bodybuilding competition. This was the beginning of a journey that would turn him into a global icon, winning multiple Mr. Olympia titles and paving the way for his career in film and politics. The 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, when he was just a child, shortly after being recognized as the reincarnation of the Tibetan spiritual leader. Taken in the late 1930s, the image portrays the young Dalai Lama sitting in front of a Buddha statue, symbolizing his future role as the spiritual guide of Tibet. On April 5, 1976, a black lawyer named Ted Landsmark unknowingly wandered into an anti-busing protest in Boston. The crowd, furious with the idea of racial separation, attacked him. In 1945, the Gadget was the first atomic bomb ever created as part of the Manhattan Project, the United States' secret program to develop nuclear weapons during World War II. In 1912, this moment captures a scientific test of the latest rugby helmet when safety measures were quite different from today. Race organizers tried to prevent Catherine Switzer from competing in the Boston Marathon. She became the first woman to finish the race, 1967. In 1945, Jewish prisoners shortly after being freed from a death train during the final days of World War II. When the atomic bomb exploded over Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, it was also photographed. The image that captures the explosion of the second bomb was released in Nagasaki on August. Nothing but rubble remains of the front of the federal building destroyed by the Oklahoma bombing. On April 19, 1995, a fuel and fertilizer truck bomb exploded in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people. A baby learning to walk in a wicker structure while the mother does laundry. 1910s. A construction worker standing on top of a steel beam on a skyscraper under construction. Columbia Tower, Seattle, 1984. A girl with her doll sitting in the ruins of her bombed house, London, 1940. This photo, known as the Kiss of Life, was taken in 1967 and captures an electrician giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a colleague who had been electrocuted while working on a power pole in Jacksonville, Florida, United States. The unconscious man named J.D. Thompson was saved by his colleague Randall G. Champion. Radio broadcasting became popular in the early 1920s following technological advances made during World War I. Weekly music broadcasts began in 1919, and by 1922 there were over 500 stations nationwide with daily broadcasts. Thomas Edison unveils his phonograph, the first machine capable of recording and playing sound, in Washington, D.C. on April 18, 1878. The facade of a 5-story department store covered with coats, as part of a coat sale and an early marketing strategy. The campaign attracted so many customers that the police had to intervene. All the coats were sold. Copenhagen, Denmark, 1936. Blonde Marilyn Monroe shines in a series of photos taken in June 1962 by George Barris. But Monroe's movie star smile hid deep agony. She died of an overdose on August 4, 1962. This photo was taken in 1920 in France during an event showcasing the original costumes of the Michelin Tire Company's mascot, known as Bibendum. Neil Armstrong returning to the lunar module shortly after his iconic step on the surface of the moon in 1969. In 1958, Elvis Presley, one of the biggest music stars at the time, was serving in the United States Army. He was drafted into military service and spent part of his time in Germany. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, better known by the pseudonym Lenin, was a Russian communist revolutionary, politician, and political theorist. This was the last photo of Vladimir Lenin. He had 3 strokes by this time and was completely mute in 1923. Photo of hay transport in the 1920s and 1930s. Before motorized trucks, hay was transported in cars and wagons pulled by horses. These early vehicles were often equipped with large beds or specialized hay racks designed to carry bales of hay. American film actress of Ukrainian origin, popular in the 1920s and 1930s in the USSR, Europe, and the United States, one of the few Hollywood actresses who did not hide her origin, as in every interview she always said she was born in Kyiv. In the 1920s, elephants were often used for various types of heavy labor, such as construction and transporting materials in countries like India and Thailand. Steve McCurry took this famous photograph during a trip to Afghanistan in 1984 to document the migration of Afghan refugees. This photo of 17-year-old Sharbat Gula was taken at the Nasirbagh refugee camp. It became the symbol of the Afghan struggle and was featured on the front page of National Geographic in June 1985. A man standing on the lap of the imposing statue of Ramses II, one of the most powerful pharaohs of ancient Egypt. This image shows a photograph left on the surface of the moon during the Apollo 16 mission in 1972. The photo depicts the family of astronaut Charles Duke, who was part of the mission's crew. On December 24, 1968, astronaut William Anders captured a photograph of Earth and part of the moon's surface that became known as Earthrise. The photograph was named by NASA as the Pillars of Creation. It shows clusters of gas and interstellar dust in the Eagle Nebula in the constellation Serpens, located about 7,000 light-years from Earth. This is the last known photo of the Titanic still afloat, taken in 1912, shortly before its tragic sinking. Ford cars were introduced during the 1930s, a time marked by the Great Depression that affected millions of Americans for several years. Stanley Woods and his Husqvarna. He was one of the great names in racing in the 1930s, winning 10 IOMTT events, a record that remained for decades before finally being broken by Mike Halewood. Nikola Tesla sits near his firing transmitter in his laboratory in Colorado Springs, 1899. The simple version of the story says that World War I began when Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Princip, held by 2 police officers in the photo, assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. The historic flight of Orville and Wilbur Wright in 1903 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. This flight made them household names. By the mid-1940s, Lana Turner was one of the highest-paid American actresses and one of MGM's biggest stars, with her films grossing the studio approximately $1 billion when converting their earnings from that time to the year 2024. Women practicing archery, 1930. During this time, women in their quest for independence also began taking care of their health by participating in various sports. The Pierce Arrow Model 80, launched in 1924. This car marked a significant change from its predecessors, being a different model from the previous ones and becoming a reference for the next. Bessie Smith, who was widely known during the Jazz Age. Nicknamed the Empress of the Blues, she was the most popular blues singer of the 1930s. Audience members at the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus were surprised by a worker dressed as a gorilla around the 1940s. Jacques Fath, 1912 to 1954, was a pioneer and created colorful and inventive designs during the 1930s, catering to a young international clientele that identified with the vitality of his brand. Manufactured by Willis Overland Motors and mass-produced between 1941 and 1945 for the Allied forces, the iconic, rugged, all-terrain Willis MB embodies the true Jeep spirit, Go anywhere, do anything. Little ships were warships that became known for returning after World War I, overcrowded with soldiers who had survived the conflict. The legendary boxer Jack Dempsey, left, playfully punching the illusionist and stuntman Harry Houdini, center, while the legendary boxer Benny Leonard, right, holds Houdini. The photograph was taken at a publicity event around the 1920s. The percussionist and Latin jazz bandleader Mongo Santa Maria was part of a select group of Cuban percussionists who migrated to the United States to work in the 1940s and 1950s. Soviet children play chess next to a bust of Lenin, Uzbekistan, 1930s. Between 1931 and 1940, 8.5 million people in the United States lost their lives due to hunger. 5 million farmers were expelled from their land due to debt. The original Betty Boop, Esther Jones, also known as Baby Esther. Esther Jones was an African-American singer and performer from the late 1920s. American actress Clara Bow, famous in the silent film era, posed for Halloween in the 1930s. Known as the great symbol of the it girl of that time, Clara embodies the festive spirit with her charisma and unique style. Simon's Drive-In restaurant in the 1930s. Wayne McAllister designed circular Simon's Drive-In restaurants in the streamlined modern style with a three-tiered roof and a neon advertising pylon. Greymount Hospital Outdoor School, early 1920s. In 1919, the building was purchased by the Belfast Corporation for the municipal hospital to treat children affected by tuberculosis. Exposure to sunlight was an essential part of the treatment for the disease. Russia endured two wars between 1914 and 1920, World War I, and then the Russian civil wars that followed the Russian Revolution. The resulting economic chaos was impacted by a drought in early 1921, and a severe famine fell upon the country. A United States Coast Guard crew is seen on patrol aboard a schooner in the 1940s. The Agaba mask, or Mugbadik, from the early 20th century, represents the strong warrior tradition of the Igbo society. Cast of Star Wars without their costumes: Harrison Ford, Han Solo; David Prowse, Darth Vader; Peter Mayhew, Chewbacca; Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia; Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker; and Kenny Baker, R2-D2, 1977. On April 15, 1865, John Wilkes Booth assassinated Abraham Lincoln. 4 days later, on April 19th, the nation mourned as funeral marchers descended Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Every year from 1920 to 1937, the Royal Air Force held a parade at the Hendon Aerodrome in the far northwest of London. The exhibition aimed to showcase the work and skills of the RAF. British suffragist Sylvia Pankhurst was arrested 15 times during her campaign for women's rights. In this historic photo, she is being toasted at a breakfast celebrating her latest release from prison. Bob Hope began his nearly 80-year career playing streetcars and boxing for money before starting a vaudeville act with a friend from dance school, Lloyd Durbin. Vaudeville was a mix of dance, comedy, and comic sketches. Annette Kellerman promotes women's right to wear swimsuits. She was arrested for indecency, 1907. A group of workers in a gold mine during the California Gold Rush in the United States, circa 1850. A German prisoner of World War II is freed by the Soviet Union and reunited with his 12-year-old daughter, who had not seen him since childhood, in 1956. A policeman stops traffic to make way for a cat carrying a kitten across the street in 1925. The models used by Grant Wood for his famous painting American Gothic. The work, created in 1930, depicts a farmer with a pitchfork next to his daughter, both with serious expressions. In 1911, during the Terra Nova expedition, led by British explorer Robert Falcon Scott to Antarctica. The image shows two members of the expedition standing in an ice cave, with the ship Terra Nova anchored in the background, surrounded by ice and snow. Hannah Stilley, born in 1746, photographed in 1840. Probably the first individual born captured in a photograph. This image captures customers exploring a music store in London in 1955, a time when vinyl records were the main way to enjoy favorite songs. In 1918, 18,000 soldiers in Des Moines, Iowa formed a human Statue of Liberty to sell war bonds during World War I. Johnny Cash prepares to perform during his famous Folsom Prison concert on January 13, 1968. In 1961, residents of West Berlin lifted children so their grandparents, who lived on the eastern side, could see them through the Berlin Wall. In 1926, brave workers climbed the heights of the Woolworth Building in New York. At that time, skyscrapers like this were being built all over the city, and workers faced great risks daily. In 1914, a group of workers poses for a photo while painting the iconic Brooklyn Bridge in New York. Suspended from high cables, these men carried out the dangerous maintenance work essential to preserve the structure. Between 1931 and 1936, thousands of workers united to build the towering Hoover Dam, one of the greatest engineering feats of the time. Located on the border between Nevada and Arizona, the dam was designed to control floods, provide irrigation, and generate hydroelectric power. In 1932, workers painted the iconic Eiffel Tower in Paris. Maintaining the tower, which involves applying several layers of paint to protect the iron structure from corrosion, was a risky and exhausting task. On January 30, 1969, the Beatles performed a historic show on top of the Apple Corps building in London. This impromptu and unexpected concert would become the band's final live performance, known as the Rooftop Concert. Nelson Mandela raises his fists after being sentenced to life imprisonment in June 1964. Lee Harvey Oswald is widely known as the man who assassinated United States President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas. After the assassination, Oswald was captured and arrested, but he was never formally tried as he was shot dead by Jack Ruby. The old Cincinnati Public Library, built in 1874, was a true architectural and cultural gem in the United States. Unfortunately, in 1955, the library was demolished, and the iconic building was replaced by a parking lot. The grandeur of the Amazon River was immortalized in some images taken by NASA from the International Space Station. Here is the 1992 photograph. The classic photo of the Beatles, taken by British photographer Fiona Adams, was used as the cover image for the band's Twist and Shout EP. Adams recalls using the rubble of a bombed-out basement. French inventor Nicéphore Niepce is credited with producing the oldest surviving camera photograph, depicting a view from his window in Saint-Loup-de-Varennes, taken in 1827 and captured after an exposure time of about 8 hours. The image of photographer Joe Rosenthal was taken on February 23, 1945, and shows U.S. Marines raising the American flag atop Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima. Alfred Stieglitz, a prominent early 20th century photographer, advocated for the idea that photography deserved the same level of recognition as painting in the art world. His innovative contributions played a key role in changing perceptions of photography. This iconic photo, taken by legendary photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson in 1932, is titled Derrière la Gare Saint-Lazare and captured a decisive moment, a hallmark of Cartier-Bresson's style. The photograph of Charles, then Prince of Wales, kissing his wife, Princess Diana, on the balcony of Buckingham Palace in London after their wedding on July 29, 1981. The famous photograph, Migrant Mother, was taken in 1936, showing 32-year-old American Florence Owens Thompson, a mother of 7 children, looking for work or help to support her family after her husband lost his job in 1931 and died the same year. Taken in 1960 by Cuban photographer Alberto Corda, it became one of the most recognizable images of the 20th century. Known as Guerrillero Heroico, the image was captured during a memorial in Havana for the victims of the La Cubre ship explosion. People collecting geoducks in Puget Sound, a region on the coast of Washington, United States, in 1910. This is a type of mollusk known for being one of the largest and longest living in the world, capable of living up to 150 years. Photo of what is believed to be the largest horse in history. However, it is most likely that the photo was manipulated by artificial intelligence. What do you think? Is this photo real or artificially produced? Type your opinion in the comments. Women in a demonstration of stockings in the 1940s. During World War II, there was a shortage of materials, including nylon, which was used for women's stockings. This caused many women to use makeup to simulate stockings, drawing lines on their legs that mimicked seams.